Oh, great and mighty warriors of Elbath! Heed my call. Please make this One Piece chapter the most glorious of all time. I beseech thee. There's geography! It has been done. I thank you, great warriors. Any One Piece chapter that has a copious amount of maps in it is already an amazing One Piece chapter. But if you have a large map right in the middle of the chapter, a big double-page spread map, oh man, that's greatest of all time right there. I don't care. Luffy turning Gear 5th, yeah, that was a cool chapter, but did it have a map in it? Zoro's Nothing Happened scene would have been way cooler if there was a map to show exactly where Zoro was standing on Thriller Bark. Oh man, this will be One Piece chapter 1172, titled The Elbath That I Admire. Yes, the Elbath I admire. It's the one where Usopp does things. That's the one that I admire. This one's good too, but like, if we could get one where Usopp's doing stuff, that would be nice, right? Actually, I think the title, it really does refer to something that Usopp says in this chapter, so we'll circle back to that. But first, we got the cover page, and the cover page is just a fan request. It's just an art request that Oda got from somebody named Pizza Maru. But this one was a really big one, because if you've been following along, I read the spoilers for these before they come out, and the spoilers for this one is, the cover request includes Mr. 2 Bon Clay, and it was clearly labeled as, this is not a cover story, this is not Bon Clay's crazy impel down escape adventure. It was just a cover request of Bon Clay trying on some cosmetics with some swans in the background also putting on some cosmetics. That's it, it's a nice cover request. I saw so many things being posted all over social media like, Bon Clay is back in the story, ladies and gentlemen, he is finally returned. And it's like, I'm sitting there kind of laughing because it's like, it's cool to see him again. Oda puts him right there front and center. He welcomes us into the chapter of just like, hey guys, I'm back. But like, it's not canon or anything, but it's nice to see him again. But it was just really funny because seeing all of the posts, like, they were basically kind of like, oh yeah, Bon Clay is in Elbath and he's kicking ass now. Which has made me like, I want that now. I want Bon Clay to just show up at Elbath just when things were at their darkest. We have the Straw Hats mobilizing now, Zoro, Sanji, Luffy. Screw it. I want them all to be defeated, and just when you think like Emu is about to bring down the pitchfork and just kill Luffy, bam! Memoirs of a Winter Sky come screaming through, and then Bon Clay saves the day. It already happened to Impel Down. We could do it again here. Nice to see you again, Bone-chan. And just to confirm to everybody, he is still alive. Like, it was confirmed he was alive. It was just confirmed, like, over a decade ago in an actual cover series that are canon, that he is currently the king, or perhaps queen, of level 5.5 New Kama Land, all right? And so there is probably going to be a big, Impel Down breakout, part 2, actually part 3 if you include the one that Shiki broke out of. Actually, part 4 if you include the one Morley broke out of. But yeah, Doflamingo's probably going to get out. All the remaining members of the Doflamingo family, everybody that's relevant that's in Impel Down right now is probably going to escape at some point. And, Bon-chan is going to be at the head of that prison breakout, right? But that has not occurred yet, but we'll get there at some point. All right. We open up with a really cool, actually, faraway establishing shot of the lift, of the elevator that's slowly making its way from the primordial realm to the sun realm. And with this shot, we just get an idea of the sheer scale of how big the Yggdrasil tree is, right? Like, we're panning out and we see this massive tree, and then there's this tiny little elevator, this tiny little lift that has like 2 ropes connecting the sun realm to the primordial realm, like probably like steel ropes or wire. And it's just kind of like, like slowly making its way to the very top. And I imagine this thing would be terrifying to ride. It would just be like swaying in the wind and just like, oh man. The thing looks like it's made out of like just two boats that are just like stacked on top of each other. But you have the new giant warrior pirates. You got Hyrudine, Goldberg, Gerd, Rodo, and Stanson. And they're all riding up with Scopper, Gibbon, Chopper, Sanji, Zoro. I think that's everybody that's currently in the elevator. And Gibbon is kind of giving them a briefing on what to expect once they reach branch number 8, once they reach the Sun Realm. It's like, all right, come on, gather around an old man. Time to tell you. We all listened to Loki's story, now listen to my story, all right? So there are 3 foes that you must best up there. He's basically giving the mission setup in a game. It's like, all right, we're about to go in. All right, what are we expecting, Gibbon? What do we got to do? What do we have to prep our spells? What's going on? It's like, all right, here's the deal. The objective is clear. They are planning on abducting 10 Elbaf children and getting them to the port and then, making off with them. If that happens, if the children reach the port and they leave Elbaf, it's game over. We won't be able to follow them after that. I don't know. I feel like you could follow them after that. You could still, pursue them on the open sea, but it would probably get way more difficult, admittedly. Yeah, so, let's just try to stop them before the children reach the port. So that's sort of like this mission has a timer, all right? It's just like, oh, no, they're about... Has anybody ever played... I don't know why this is the first thing that popped into my mind. Anybody ever play the original PlayStation Spider-Man games from, the PS1? Yeah, remember those ones? Like Enter Electro, and then the first one with Doc Ock and, Carnage and shit were the villains? There were a couple of missions like that, where there was, a little bar at the bottom of the screen where it's like, you gotta get to the end of the level before Sandman makes off the train, and, it's like the little bar at the bottom of the screen, and so it's the same thing here with, the Elbaf children slowly walking to the port. Once they get to the port, it's over, game over, you lose. All right, so that's the situation with that. So that's kind of our timetable, right? Gibbon says they're going to be taken to the Holy Land, and once there, they are going to serve as shields and hostages. Okay, so essentially they are going to be there, so the giants will be subjugated. They'll bend the knee to the world government, and they'll take whatever orders they give them. They will be slaves, effectively. All right. Now Jarl has a different perspective on that. We'll get to that at the end of the chapter, but that's what Gibbon is telling them. That's what the plans of the Gods Knights are. Okay, leverage to turn the warriors of Elbaf into battle thralls to make an army out of all of Elbaf, right? And so Zoro and the new giant warrior pirates are a little, curious on exactly how this is even possible, right? They're calling the Gods Knights humans, which, yeah, I mean, at one point they were humans. They have these abilities now granted to them via the Covenant contracts by Emu, so they have this immortality ability, and they can do other stuff, like summon the abyss and things, but I guess at their core they're still human. More than anything, they were like, wow, it's crazy. Zoro's saying it's insane that, these 3 individuals could not be stopped by Dory and Bragi or even you, Yasan. And so Gibbon is like, yeah, I really have no excuse. I'm sorry about that. Which, no, I mean, Gibbon, you do have an excuse. I mean, you did try your best. If anything, Colin was the one that kind of messed up that plan, but, he was a kid. You can't really blame him for being excited to see his dad. Dad, you're gonna come save me! And then Gunko immediately was like, oh, that's your son? Okay, I'll just go to kill him first, and then that way I'll be able to attack you, right? And so, I mean, there wasn't really much Gibbon could have done in that situation. He even used Future Sight to see if he would have been able to make it, and he didn't. The Future Sight would have led to maybe perhaps Gibbon attacking Gunko, but then Colin getting stabbed through the neck and being killed. So, there wasn't really much there Gibbon could do, if unless he wanted to sacrifice his child, which obviously he's not going to do that. So I think he does have an excuse. But Sanji is like, yeah, but I don't understand. These are giant children, right? And so how would the humans, even if they're God's Knights, how would they get them to the port to begin with? I don't understand what's going on. So Gibbon explains the 3 Devil Fruit abilities of the God's Knights, Killingham, Summers, and Gunko. Remember, and this is very crucial, Gibbon does not know that Gunko is currently possessed by Emu. Okay? In fact, Gibbon has never directly met Emu, because at God Valley, it seemed to be it was Roger and, Garp, obviously, I think Whitebeard, got to see it, all those, strongest characters, Kaido, got to see straight up, Saturn being, possessed by Emu, but even then, they didn't really know what was going on with that. They just knew that was a Gorosei, and this weird black fog was, spewing off of him, so that might have just been something that Saturn or all the Gorosei could do. They didn't know that was Emu, the Shadow Ruler of the entire world, but Gibbon wasn't even there for that. So Gibbon is just okay, well, here are the 3 Gods Knights you're gonna have to face. One of them is a woman that has the ability to basically, compulse people to walk in a particular direction. She has an ability called, it's like some kind of arrow ability that makes them walk in a singular direction and they can't be stopped, okay? They're forced to walk in one direction. They're just going to keep marching towards the village harbor, and we see, because it's in the sun realm, obviously it's not sea level, there's a cloud canoe, and once they reach that cloud canoe on a piece of island cloud, they're going to escape. It's going to, go down the Rainbow Bridge, or maybe go down a cloud into the ocean, and then they'll make it out into open water, into the Grand Line, and then they'll eventually make their way to Marijois. It would still take a bit. It would take a while to go from Elbaf to Marijois, because they're not allowed, they can't use the Abyss on the children. Only the ones that have the Covenant can travel via the Abyss. So they're gonna still have to sail all through the Grand Line, through a good chunk of the New World to make it to the Red Line. That would take a while. That would take probably a few weeks, I would imagine. So I feel like there's still more opportunities there to stop them on the way to Marijois, but, obviously help them, before that, right? So it's like, we got to stop them before they reach that boat, okay? And so Roto is like, all right, so there's like a power that's forcing them in one direction. Why can't we just stop the children from going in that direction? Why can't we just move them out of the line of the arrow, right? What's going on there? And it's just like, well, well, if you would pay attention, if you would let me finish my damn story, Road. I'm still talking. Gyabon is like, he's not that mean about it, but he's like, I'm in the middle of explaining things, all right? There's this other guy named Summers, and I know a little bit about him. I used to kick his ass all the time back in the day. Oh, memories. Anyway, Summers has the ability to create thorns around people. He ate the thorn fruit. He's a briar man, okay? And so he can make these thorns translucent and invisible, so you can't see them, but they are there. And so if you try to physically, grab the children and carry them away, then you'll get stabbed. If you try to disrupt the line that they're walking in any way, the children will bump into each other, and then they'll, basically turn into pincushions, and they'll stab one another. And we've seen all this before earlier in the arc, when Saul was trying to save the children. He's like, all right, let me try to just pick them up and move them over here. Ow, that hurt. Okay. And so the next idea was, Saul was like, all right, I don't want to get stabbed. So he grabbed these two big shields and he sat right in front of the line as the children were walking towards them. And he's like, all right, these shields will protect me, and then that'll stop the children from going forward. So the shields did stop the thorns. Saul didn't get stabbed, but then the children started bumping into one another, and they started getting stabbed, and they were bleeding, and Saul's like, oh shit, sorry kids. The next strategy was for him to go to the end of the line where a kid named Bjorn was, who we're actually going to find out that Bjorn is actually Roto's little brother. So that's an interesting one. They do have a similar hairstyle, so I should have assumed, I guess. But anyway, so Saul went to the end of the line and he grabbed a rope and he put the rope around Bjorn. He's like, all right, I'll just start from the end of the line and I'll start pulling the children out that way. And so he tried to do that, but then one of the nightmare creatures, Fenrir, showed up and started attacking Saul, and Saul had to let go of the rope. So that method honestly seemed like the most viable. That method actually did seem like it was working, to actually just go to the end of the line and start pulling the children out one at a time and just tying them up so they couldn't move anymore. But the nightmare creatures ran interference. So all you really got to do is have multiple people to just deal with the nightmare monsters while somebody else is, saving the children. And honestly, that method might work, right? And so Gyabon explains about Summer's ability about the thorns. Gerd is, of course, like, oh my god, that is so cruel. That's so dastardly. What kind of villains would do such a thing? Think of the children. And so then, lastly, Gyabon mentions Killingham's ability, where he has the power. He doesn't even really know what his power is. He's just like, yeah, there's a third guy that has some kind of ability to summon nightmare monsters. I honestly don't know how that one works, but that's what he can do. Alright, so there's giant monsters being spawned out of the children's nightmares, like giant wolves and demons and dragons and all sorts of shit, right? So a lot of scary stuff is happening to prevent the escape, alright? So he's like, they basically are setting up some really twisted game with the combination of these three devil fruit abilities in order to kidnap the children, right? So that's the plan here. And so that's what we're gonna have to deal with. The easiest method, as Gyabon says, is we got to target these three ability users, because if we take out any one of them, then it becomes way easier to save the children. While all three of them are active and they're using their powers, you know, it becomes more difficult because they have to keep walking forward because of the arrow ability. They can't be, forcibly moved out of that line because of the thorn ability, and it's even hard to even get close to them to even attempt anything because of the nightmare creatures, all right? So we got to start taking them out first. However, that's going to be really difficult because they have the power of immortality and they can regenerate. So even if you manage to get a sneak attack off on Summers, for instance, and you manage to like slice his damn head off, his head's just going to reform. So you got to figure out another way to deal with it. And then we have Goldberg, the chef of the new Giant Warrior Pirates. Goldberg like immediately comes up with like, all right, well, if they are immortals, then we shouldn't bother trying to kill them. Rather, we should try to contain them or trap them or maybe crush them in some way. Goldberg, that's genius. I love how that's the first. Okay, Goldberg, you're now one of my favorite characters in Elbaf, one of my favorite giants in Elbaf. I don't know if you're number one, you know, there's Loki and then, you know, also Ripley, she's up there as well. The Gerd is there too. But like, you know, he's in the top 5, ladies and gentlemen. He's in the top 5. All right, Goldberg immediately is like, dealing with immortal creatures. Well, there's no point in killing them because they're immortal. Let's try containing them. Yeah, there you go. Maybe even eating them. Okay, Goldberg, yeah, you might have went a little bit too far with that one. Actually, I think that would be a horrible idea. A horrible idea. Goldberg, I think, is just spitballing ideas, like throwing darts at a wall, just hoping one thing hits the bullseye. But he's like, all right, we could try trapping them or crushing them. I guess we could try to eat them, I suppose. You know, that would be an awful idea to just pick up Summers and just eat him. The inside of your body would just be shredded via thorns, all right? So that's not a good idea. Maybe just keep that one. Maybe use that one as a last resort if you really, really have to. But like the first 2 ideas, maybe immobilizing them, trapping them, or crushing them into a pancake like Charlos so they can't move anymore. That might be a good idea. That's an option. That's on the table, all right? And so they're like, yeah, sounds promising. Now, remember, Zoro listened to this explanation. I mean, Sanji did too, but Zoro's gonna say something at the end of the chapter. So I just want you all to understand that Zoro was sitting there listening to all of these abilities. It was like, okay, that's what Gunko can do. All right, and that's what Summers can do, and that's what Killingham can do. Okay, these are all the Devil Fruit abilities we're working with. They're combining their powers to kidnap the children. Okay, so Zoro's cooking. Zoro's cooking on something, right? Goldberg kind of is too, and he's the chef, so that makes sense. But we'll see where this goes. All right, with that explanation out of the way, the lift finally squeaks its way all the way up to the Sun Realm at branch number 8, and it just hits the top, and then you see Goldberg there looking all dedicated and Hiruden, and they step off the lift, and they just see absolute chaos. Like, Gyabon kind of prepared them for what was going to happen, but I don't think they expected this. They arrive at the Sun Realm, they're looking out, everything is on fire. There is the Great Eric, the ship, the flagship of the Giant Warrior Pirates that's over 100 years old, is blasted into splinters and is on fire. And we see an entire onslaught, an army of these monsters from the Nightmare Realm. We see the Needhog and giant birds and a lion griffin bird with a sunflower head and Draugrs everywhere. The Thunder Monster, the Cloud Monster that Frankie destroyed, that's back because they do regenerate. They just keep spawning out of those nightmare fissures. So even if you take them down, they still come back. We see the nightmare version of the Sun God. We see the nightmare version of not Loki, but like a big burly giant with a beard. Maybe one of the children viewed Loki that way because they don't really have a great understanding of what Loki looks like. So maybe that is supposed to be Loki. We see the bear with a helmet. We see the ghost with a top hat. All be aware of the ghost with a top hat. Woo! You know, so they're seeing all this, everything's on fire, and it's just, it looks like absolute fucking chaos, right? They're looking at all this stuff here. And then Gyabon goes on to say that, like, oh yeah, by the way, Dory and Bragi, they were, you know, arriving here with the crew trying to save everybody. I was with them, but they got shot down by those nightmare monsters. And so now the Great Eric is burning apart. And they just, like, this is horrifying, right? Because the Great Eric is the symbol of the Giant Warrior Pirates, and that's Hiruden's, like, entire, like, you know, he looked up to them growing up. Like, that's basically his Shanks figure, okay? So he's looking at the Great Eric burning down. This would be like Luffy looking at the Red Force burning down. Like, this is a big deal. And so Hiruden's like, I can't believe this. Oh my goodness. And then at that exact moment, Kashi emerges out of the trees. Oimo is not with him. Oimo is in a different group. We'll get to him in a moment. But Kashi Kashi emerges, and he's just like, oh, is that you, Hirudin? Please, you gotta save the children, and you gotta save the captains, Hirudin, please. And so Kashi gives them more of an explanation on what's been happening since they went down into the primordial realm, the stuff that Gyabon was not there for, so he doesn't know about the Domi Reversi and Emu and everything like that, right? And so Kashi goes on to explain, Dory and Bragi have been turned into some horrible demon monsters. They're just not themselves anymore. They're marching towards the western village to kill Elder Jarl. Please, Hirudin, you need to stop them. Gerd is like, okay, Kashi, but what about the children, though? Is like, what about them? Are they still here? What's happening? Is like, oh no, I think they're still walking on the branch. They're making it to the port. Oh my God, they might have reached the harbor by now. Oh my God, this is the worst day ever. I don't know where Oimo is. Kashi also tells Roto, he's like, Roto, by the way, one of the children is your little brother Bjorn. No, not Bjorn. They have Bjorn. No. Oh man, this is a crazy day, right? Man, they were all getting drunk at a banquet like 2 hours ago, and now they have to deal with all this shit. Right? Okay, so Roto has a little brother named Bjorn. Bjorn, by the way, was the kid that was like, oh man, I hope if they save anybody, they save me and all the other children. You know, if they get killed, it's whatever, but like, I hope at least I survive. And then I think Ylva and the other kids are like, what the hell, Bjorn? What the hell? He's like, hey, I'm just trying to look out for myself here, all right? You know, and so that was Rode's little brother. Okay. So Rode might actually have a really cool moment. You know, Rode started off this arc being a villain, masquerading as the sun god, being a creep, you know, undressing the Straw Hats, you know, putting like, oh yes, Nami, I will put you in my outfit that I made myself, you know. He was a pretty big creep at the beginning of this arc. He did actually manage to save Elbaf a little bit, though, by capturing all the Cypherpole agents indirectly that were coming to the island. Still not great, but now he has a little brother he needs to go save. So we might actually have a relatively cool scene where Roto shows up with, he does have a big, like a long sword that he uses to fight with. He shows up and he's just like, I will save you, baby brother! Ah! And so that might, you know, that might be kind of cool. We'll see how that goes there, right? Maybe Goldberg and Rode will team up and fight against some nightmare creatures or something to save Bjorn, all right? So Rode actually just runs off. So if nothing else, he cares about his little brother. He just immediately runs off from the rest of the group to go save Bjorn, okay? Gerd and Goldberg immediately follow him, like, I'll join you too, we'll come help. So they go run out. Sanji goes up to Kashi and is like, hey, which way's the school? That's where Nami and the other ones are. That's where Nami and Robin are. Where's the school? Which direction? And Kashi's like, okay, so you see that big fire, that's big plume of smoke coming out of the trees? Yeah, that's where the school is. It is currently on fire. Why is it on fire? Do you not see all of the bullshit that's going on right now? A building being on fire should not surprise you. Zoro is like, all right, anyway, you say Dory and Bragi have gone crazy. All right, so basically what they're going to have to do is start splitting up into different, you know, groups here because there's just no way. There's so much stuff happening. And then we get the double page spread with the big map. All right, so I have, of course, drawn my own version of it here. This is branch number 8. And so right here we have the library, we have the Owl Library, and we have the Walrus School, okay? And so these SH, these are the Straw Hats that are currently located right here. This X right here represents Saul. So this will be like Robin, Jinbei, Nami, Usopp. Brook actually is no longer with them. We're going to cover him in a moment. So they are right there close to the school. Up here is where the elevator is. So this is where, you know, the new Giant Warrior Pirates, Gabon, Sanji, Zoro, this is where they arrived. This entire area is just covered with nightmare creatures. Here are Dory and Bragi and the Domi Reversi giants that are marching toward the village. Here is Ripley and Oimo and some other giants and the mothers that are all going to try to rescue their children. The children are right here on branch number 8, marching towards the port. Here's the Western Village. Here's West Castle. Okay, and so this just leads up to like the other branches there. And then this goes down, I guess, to another one. So yeah, that's basically what we're working with right here and the group. They have to split into a group to go and save Dory and Bragi to stop them from marching on the village and murdering Elder Jarl and all of the citizens there. They have to have another group that goes and, you know, to the Owl Library and the school school to make sure that the Straw Hats are okay, and then they also have to worry about the kids. All right, so there's like 3 major threats going on here, plus nightmare monsters abound just everywhere that could attack them at any given time, all right? So we kind of zoom into different locations. We see the Walrus School where we see the teachers. They have taken all of the children that are currently asleep. You know, Killingham used his powers to put them all asleep. So they are outside, they're asleep, but the school and the library are burning down. Now, they're not completely ash yet. They are still in the process of burning, but they still have their shape of buildings, okay? Like, so they're still, like, structurally sound for the moment. Still no idea what's going on with Biblo. No idea what's happening with Biblo inside of the library. I don't know if he's still asleep or if he's gonna wake up. I feel like the magic ancient owl is gonna wake up and be pissed off that his library is on fire, all right? But we still don't know anything about him. Then we cut over to the Straw Hats, where we see Robin still ensnared by Summer's thorns, and then Jinbei, Usopp, and Nami are still tied up via Gunko's arrows. And Robin is just like, the library's burning down, we need to do something. Jinbei's like, oh man, I don't think Chopper's gonna be back anytime soon. And Brook seems to have, you know, figured out something and he ran off somewhere. And then Nami's like, we need to get these bandages off, come on, we need to think of something, guys. And Usopp's like, Dory, Broggy, why are you doing this? This isn't the Elbaf that I admire, you know, like, okay. So that's what's going on with the Straw Hats. Now, what about Brook? Where the hell did Brook go? And how did Brook go anywhere? Because, you know, he was tied up. You might just say he used his Yomi Yomi no Mi to astral project himself. He had his soul leave his body. But the thing is, and I've even zoomed in here, I don't even see Brook's body anywhere. Okay, you see Robin, you see Nami, you see Usopp and Jinbei, and you see the library burning in the background. You don't see, like, Brook's just skeleton body on the ground still tied up. That would at least lead to believe that, like, oh, he just, you know, used astral projection. So, do you guys remember when Brook was fighting against Zeo during Fishman Island, and Zeo literally, like, used that, it was like that chain, like, whip thing, and he wrapped it around Brook, and he literally snapped Brook's head off, and so Brook's head was, like, laying over there, and then his body was over there, and using his soul powers, he was like, soul, and then the soul, like, connected to his skull that was laying, like, several meters away, and it just popped back onto his body, like, soul, right? So, we've talked about this before, right? Brook is an abomination amongst, you know, the mortal realm. He is not supposed to exist, right? His power comes from the underworld that is forced into our mortal plane, all right? So, would it not be possible, if he was able to do that kind of stuff, like if his head or his arm gets popped off or separated, he could just use his soul powers to, like, tether himself back together. Would it not be possible for Brook to just, like, disassemble all of his body one bone at a time and just, like, you know, slowly, you know, separate himself from where he was being tied up and then build his body anew and just be like, I have been rebuilt, yoo-hoo-hoo-hoo! And then he ran off. And apparently, he ran off without telling the rest of the Straw Hats what the hell he was doing. So, whether or not he's astral projecting or he's actually managed to just get out of the arrows and escape another way, he didn't spend any time explaining to Jinbei, Usopp, Robin, or Brook. Well, he is Brook. He didn't take time to explain it to himself. Jinbei, Usopp, Nami, or Robin, where he was going, what his plan was. So, it must have been something he came up with, like, on the cuff. It must have been like, I have an idea, yo-hoo-hoo-hoo, I gotta get going, and so he just ran the hell off. So, obviously Brook has something to do with Gunko. We see a flashback of Gunko when she was a child, singing along with Brook when he was, like, playing the violin, right? Which seems to imply back when Brook was still alive, so when he was in his, like, you know, 20s or something, so probably, like, 70 years ago. Gunko is probably, like, around 70, 80 years old. Like, actually, like, you know, chronologically, it's just using the powers that she got from Emu or something involving Emu. She does not age, all right? But she seems to be, like, around that age, actually, okay? And so, I like to think that she was living at Marijois at the time, and Brook was in the West Blue, but he was part of that battle convoy, so occasionally he would go to Marijois with the king of his realm, and then, you know, every 4 years he would, you know, meet Gunko, and he's like, oh, Gunko, it's been a while, it's been 4 years, let's sing the song again. And so they would meet each other every now and then, and Gunko really liked Brook's music, and then after a while, either Gunko got taken into the inner sanctum to be Emu's, like, personal servant, and Brook didn't see her anymore, or Brook, you know, at that point decides to go off and, you know, be a pirate with the Rumbar crew, with Yorkie and everybody, so they never saw each other again. There's theories out there that Gunko is, like, Brook's daughter, which I
I don't know if it's that connection, just because, like, when Brook was first encountering Gunko, he had, like, a question mark over his face of, like, huh? And then later on, when he was tied up, you know, after he got a good look at Gunko, Brook was like, you know, she kind of reminds me of that other person, right? I feel like, yes, it might have been a very, very long time ago, but if Brook had a daughter, right, and Gunko is the spitting image of his daughter, I feel like it wouldn't just be like, huh, I kind of remember you from something. Huh, she's sort of familiar. I wonder. No, I don't think it would be, I think it would be immediate, right? I think it'd be like, oh my God, you are my long lost daughter, or something like that, right? I think it would be something like that. I don't think she's Brook's daughter, but I do think that, yeah, they either knew each other when he was, you know, when he was alive, certainly when he was still alive, in the West Blue or at Marie Joie. Not really sure how that would all go down, but yeah, Brook ran off somewhere to go deal with Gunko, who is currently being possessed by Emu. So I'm not really sure exactly what his plan is, but maybe he'll save the day. Maybe he'll be able to get through to Gunko and she'll be able to push away Emu's influence. That would be huge, right? So that's what's happening with the Straw Hats right now. They still have no way to get out except for Brook. Then we just see Dory and Broggy that are currently Domi Reversi that are marching towards the village, and they're just like, kill Elder Jarl! Kill Elder Jarl! You know, they're just like marching towards the village. Dory, Broggy, and all the other the other giant warrior pirates that have been Domi Reversi, right? And so you have some guards around the village that are like, oh, please stop! Stop, captains! You can't! Right? Then we have a view of Ripley and Oimo. One of Oimo's children, Olaf, is one of the kids that are being kidnapped. Obviously, Ripley is Colin's mother, and so they're just like, hang in there, kids, we're coming to save you. All right, so they're rushing towards them. We also see some of the moms, like Bent's mother is in the background going to save her kid. And then we see the hostage group. We see the children still marching towards the port. And so they're like, oh man, we're heading towards the harbor, aren't we? Once we get there, we're not going to be able to come back. And then Colin is, you know, he's the line leader essentially, and he's like, no whining, we're warriors of Elbaf, we'll get through anything. And it's like, but we're not warriors, Colin, shut up. We had a spelling test today. I learned how to spell 3 different versions of weather just for this. 3rd grade spelling bee gave me the word weather. I spelled it wrong. Came in 7th place. 7th place. Should have known. All right, anyway, so that was like a war flashback for a moment there. 3rd grade spelling bee, I remember that. Anyway, West Village, all right. We now have Jarl, and all of the other warriors are mobilizing. They're picking up arms, and they're telling Jarl, like, Elder Jarl, you can't. You got to get out of here. You got to, we don't want you to die, right? You're old. We don't want you to die. And Jarl instead is looking at them is like, hey, if you all want to run, you can run now, but I'm standing my ground. I am a warrior of Elbaf through and through to the very end, right? It's like, Dory and Broggy won't listen to us anymore, Captain Jarl. We gotta leave. And then Jarl's like, no, I know what I must do. So he takes out the, the telediction snail, I think it was called. It's the type of snail that works, specifically for Elbaf. Communications don't really work that great outside of Elbaf, but this method is able to, use as an intercom system for the entire island. Like, it announces to everybody, right? Sort of like this one snail relays information to all the other snails as, speakers throughout the island, okay? And so he picks up the receiver there and he begins to address the nation of Elbaf. He's like, listen up, people of Elbaf! I will tell you everything before I die. Our late King Harald always believed we could come together with the rest of the world in peace and prosperity. He attempted to join the world government to further this endeavor. However, he was shunned and betrayed by the world government. 14 years ago on that fateful day, I saw it with my own eyes. Harold and all of those other soldiers were killed by a demon, not by Loki. He may be boorish, and in fact, yeah, he did do a lot of horrible things, but he did not kill his father. Loki is innocent there. Harold got killed by a demon, which isn't exactly true, but hey, you gotta get morale up, if nothing else, right? So Jarl goes on to say, I held my tongue for the sake of my people. I did not want us to get into an untimely war with the world government. Our king never would have wanted that.
Loki took the people's anger upon himself and he went out to sea. And then you have Zoro there that's just like, that's not quite how I would have put that story. And Hiruden is just like, hey, don't get carried away, Elder Jarl, don't say too much. Because they're walking a fine line here. They gotta figure out a way to motivate the giants to pick up arms, because what Jarl is about to announce and declare is a big deal. So he's really gotta fire up the citizens of Elbaf. He really has to, because remember, the world government's whole thing was, we want to mobilize every single giant on Elbaf as a warrior to fight for us. And Jarl is going to do something similar here, but in the opposite way, right? And so we have a cool double-page spread of Killingham, Gunko, Emu, and then Summers there as well. He goes on to say, now today, 3 new demons, just like the ones that killed Harald all those years ago, have appeared to subjugate our nation. I had hoped this matter was behind us, but we are in once more need of great power. Summers is there off to the side, just kind of like politely listening to this, and he's like, yeah, this job seems pretty much over. I think I've done all I can do at this point. I'm just gonna go to bed. So Summers is already checking out. He's just like, yeah, Emu, Gunko is here. Killingham has the nightmare monsters. I could just go back to bed, right? Kind of ballsy for Summers to say that when Gunko Emu is here. When Emu is currently possessing her and she's here, like, your boss is right there in front of you, and Summers is like, yeah, I could probably just go back to sleep. It's probably fine. The boss is right there, dude. All right, anyway. Jarl goes on. I'm speaking to you now, demons. You damn dastardly villains that are trying to subjugate our people. You can take our culture and our history away from us. You can burn down our libraries, but let our little ones go. If you think this will crush our spirit, you have made a grave mistake. We will not show you the same patience that Harald did. You speak of subjugating us, our people, to be your slaves. Who do you bastards think you're dealing with? And it's like, Emu, by the way, is listening to all of this and isn't saying a word. Emu is possessing Gunko, and it's just like the ellipses dots of just like, just like listening to all of this, but not actually responding, not showing anger, not showing frustration or being upset or anything, just politely listening to Jarl's words. Jarl says, forgive me, little ones. Cover your ears if you are able. And so, what we're about to say here, we have Usopp there, and just like, well said, Jarl, the Elbaf I admire would never bend the knee to these villains of the world government, right? So Usopp is cheering them on. If the Harley prophecies are true, the world is about to face a great divide, and that time is now. So be it! From this day forward, Elbaf stands against the world government! Elbaf! And, I'm going to add in here that all of the other, giants of Elbaf are also chanting, Elbaf! Elbaf! Right, all right. And so, yeah, what Jarl is basically saying here, at least the way that I'm, interpreting this, and also he says for the children to cover their ears so they don't hear this, what Jarl is straight up saying to the government and to Emu directly is, listen, we offered up our library, our knowledge, and our books to you to save our children. Let them go. If you do not let them go, it's war. We're going after you. We do not care. I mean, we care about our children, but we are not going to be bending the knee and subjugate to you. We are not, essentially Jarl is saying, we are not allowing our children to be as hostages. If you take our children away from us, it's all out war. You're dead. We're going. All right, it's happening, right? We're not just going to sit there and be like, okay, you have our children as hostages. So Jarl's making that choice of like, we have to do this. We're doing it this way, right? He did tell them, he did give them a last like option to just release the children now and it's fine. But if not, it's on. It's war. It's Elbafian war. All right? Did you really think that thorns, illusions, and this little reversey game would be enough to make us bow? Zoro's sitting there on top of Hiruden's shoulder. He's like, I like this geezer. I like this guy. This dude, he's a no bullshit kind of guy. I like him. Hiruden's like, I bet you would. 300 years ago, he was known as the strongest man to have ever hailed from these waters. There was another, old waterfall beard Jarl.
but he was murdered by a 5-year-old in a polka-dotted moo-moo about 60-something years ago. It was quite tragic. But Jarl is the greatest warrior of all time. Maybe Jarl was stronger than Yorl. Maybe Jarl really was like the strongest warrior of all time, like 300 years ago in his prime, right? All of the giants begin shouting, "We will never submit to your dominion. What say you, proud warriors of Elbaf?" "Yeah, Elder Jarl, we love you. Let's go." You know. And so at the end of the day, you know, they haven't had a war in quite some time. The whole idea was moving away from war, moving away from what Harald wanted. But Jarl right here is taking the reins, and he's just like, we can't, it's while the government, while the Gods Knights and Emu and the Gorosei and the Celestial Dragons still exist in this world, this peaceful world, this peaceful Elbaf, with no war that Harald dream of, that could never occur, right? So we have to go back to our old ways, at least for now, for this final war that the Harley predicts. That's the way I'm gleaming at this. Usopp is just gushing. He's got, you know, the heart eyes, and he's like, "Oh my god, Elbaf, the Elbaf I know and love is finally back. Isn't it awesome, Nami?" Nami's like kicking him in the face. It's like, yeah, whatever, Usopp, we get it. Magical land of giants. Maybe if you could figure out a way to get out of here, maybe you could join them, right? And so Nami's like, just like, damn it, am I the only one trying to escape at this point? Right? And so Usopp is freaking out, so hopefully he'll get freed, all the Strats will get out of there, and you know, they'll be able to join the Giants and help fighting. You know, I had an idea. I have no idea if this would work or not, but what if all you need to get out of Gunko's arrow ability is Usopp takes out like a Sharpie or a paintbrush and just draws an arrow in the opposite direction? Would that just cancel out the vector power? I mean, hey, it's not a great idea, but it's an idea, all right? It's an option, right? Okay, so last scene of the chapter, Jarl and the other giants that are in the Western Village. You have Dory and Broggy breaching the gates. They're arriving, and remember, they're way bigger now because the Domi Reversi, you know, enhanced them. They're like twice the size. They're like ancient giant size now. And they're like, "Oh, Elder Jarl, we're here to kill you." And then Jarl takes a sword, and he begins, like, striking a pose. Now, we only see him from the back. I don't know if this is the sword he pulled out of his head, because if you zoom in, you still can kind of see something coming out. It's from the back, but you can see the angle. You could sort of see the hilt of a sword coming out of his helmet. So I don't think it's the same sword. Actually, it's not, because the guard is different. It is Harald's sword, and the guard sort of like juts up a little bit, sort of, and that sword's different. So I don't think it's the sword. I think if Jarl pulled the sword out of his head, I think Oda would have actually shown us that scene, right? I don't think it would have just been like, oh, he has a sword now, so it's a different sword, right? Dory has his pitchfork sword, and Broggy has his demon axe, and he's like, ah! And then all the other giants are mobilizing to fight him. And then finally we have Hiruden, Stanson, and Zoro arriving. I don't know who else might be there. Gerd and Goldberg and Rode are going off to try to save the children because Bjorn is there, and obviously Sanji is going to try to save the Straw Hats. So how could Sanji manage to save the Straw Hats? How could Sanji manage to nullify the arrow ability? I don't know if there's a way Sanji could do that. I mean, he could try to burn through them and see if that works, but I don't know what else. Sanji's good at cooking and he's good at kicking. So if one of those things can't break through the arrow bindings, I don't know what Sanji's gonna do, but he obviously ran off there. So we have Hiruden, Stanson, and Zoro. And they're like, we're finally here, we can see the village. Last panel of the chapter, we have Zoro there taking out Enma, being like, don't worry, I have a plan. End of chapter, no break next week. Okay. Zoro has a plan. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. Zoro's got a plan. Does it involve swords or booze? One of the two. Zoro's like, well, actually, it involved just swords, but adding some booze in, that could work too. All right, but no, Zoro's he's been thinking, he's been cooking this entire chapter. He's sitting there on Hiruden's shoulder, he's listening to the whole spiel. He was listening to everything that Gyabon told him about the 3 abilities. He was listening to everything Kashi was saying about where everybody's positioned and what's happening with Dory and Broggy. And so he was listening to everything. And so Zoro is just like, I got my goggles, my indestructible goggles, my lucky goggles. I got my sword. I got my wits. What do you think Zoro's plan is? Honestly, I have no fucking idea. I've seriously thought to think about like what Zoro's plan could be that could be like, oh, don't worry, I have a plan. I know how to fix this. So first of all, like, what specific thing is he indicating? Is he like, I have a plan to turn Dory and Broggy back to normal? Or is he like, I have a plan to defeat Summers. I have a plan to defeat Killingham. I have a plan to defeat Gunko. I have a plan to free the Straw Hats. I have a plan to save the children. Like, it could be any number of those plans, right? There's so many things on the board right now. I have a plan to get wicked drunk tonight and save the day, right? Like, it could be anything involving Zoro. It's like, I'm finally going to open my my left eye, sorry. I'm finally going to open my left eye and reveal the power of the Rinnegan. Yeah, and what could it be? What could it be? I'm finally gonna reveal what the whole thing with that Grim Reaper at Onigashima was all about. I made a contract with the Lord of the Dead back at Onigashima. It's now time for me to, call in the debt, or something. I don't know what it could be. I really don't know. Because, Zoro is a tactical guy when he can be, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of times Zoro will just jump in, pull out his sword, he'll start fighting and stuff like that. But Zoro can be smart and tactical, and I feel like you sort of have to be here, unless Zoro's plan is just like, because I'm sure Gyabon would have told them about the Conqueror's Haki thing, and especially Gyabon told Zoro, like, hey, you have Conqueror's Haki now, you gotta know how to use that. So maybe Zoro was, like, preparing himself mentally, like, okay, I have Conqueror's Haki now, alright, I have a plan, guys. Okay, wait a minute. Now that I'm thinking about it, this might actually be Zoro's plan. All right, this is Zoro's plan. Stop me if you've heard this one before. All right, guys, here's the deal. I'm going to take out Enma. I'm going to charge this sword up with Armament Haki and Conquerors, because I have that now. And I'm going to cut them really, really hard. I'm going to swing Enma really hard with Conqueror's Haki, and that'll probably do something. Honestly, it's a simple but not a bad plan. I mean, hey, it worked on God Valley. Zoro obviously wouldn't know that, but it worked on God Valley. Just like, I'm gonna use like a lot of Haki and then just use one sword swing. That'll probably knock them out of their Domi Reversi, or it'll at least knock them out to the point where they can't fight anymore. Because they're currently heading towards the Western Village, so I'm going to assume Zoro's plan has nothing to do with freeing the Straw Hats, or even really saving the children right now. It's specifically something to deal with Dory, Broggy, and the rest of the Giant Warrior Pirates that have been Domi Reversi'd. So it's either something to knock them out so they can no longer fight anymore, or it's something where he has an idea to turn them back into the way they were. I don't really think there's anything Zoro could come up with that, like, I can nullify this weird demon magic, right, other than just hitting them really hard with Conqueror's Haki. So, since Gyabon told him all about this and, like, you need to know how to use this power, that's probably what Zoro's been, like, mentally working on the last couple of chapters. He's like, okay, I got Conqueror's Haki now, all right. I didn't know I had that, so now I have something else in my toolbox to use. All right, Enma, let's go. Right, it might have been something like that, but hey. When Roronoa Zoro, the pirate hunter, one of the Yonko commanders, the right arm of Monkey D. Luffy, a man with over a 1 billion berry bounty, the man that has drunk dry every bar in his wake, every tavern in his path, says he has a plan, you listen to that plan. You got to at least hear him out, right? Okay. But yeah, this was more of a recap chapter, if anything. But hey, we learned some stuff along the way. We learned that, Jarl's not going to back down. We learned that Rodo has a little brother. We kind of see where everybody's located right now. And we know that Usopp is just a huge Elbaf fanboy, which we already knew, but like that's really prominent in this chapter here, okay? So, yeah, we learned that Zoro's got a plan. What kind of plan is that? I guess we'll have to find out next time. No break next week. I know we've had a lot of breaks on and off, but no more. We're going right into chapter 1173 next week. I'm excited. I think Oda needed to do this chapter this way just to really kind of like remind everybody where we're at. Because remember, last chapter is kind of where we ended the flashback. Last chapter was like transition from flashback land back to the present. And so this is the first proper chapter that is completely back in the present. We really needed the map and everything, okay? And I also, like I said, made a video where I recapped everything as well. You can go check that out on my channel. All right. Well, anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Techie 101 signing out. Zoro has a plan. He has a plan. Don't doubt him. He's got this.